That street corner value system is overpowering.
Never no less than 50,000, you understand, a day.
Damn, we got all the $100 bills in America.
Black power was for equality for African Americans. Black gangsters, they're destroying the community.
The death wish that it's still possible to go out here and sell some cocaine and buy a Cadillac.
Jews, the Irish. I mean, it's every group in America has attempted to go to the next level economically. The story of organized crime and narcotics has played a part in it.
We had indicted Frank, and our indictment included about 20 foreign defendants, Venezuelan customs agents, and Jules Serini, the courier who came from Marseille with 22 kilos of heroin. Miller and I were requested to report to the criminal division immediately for a meeting with the CIA. There are international ramifications as to things we're doing in Venezuela and with the Russians that we can't talk about. And you will have your indictment dismissed in federal court. Need I say more? And we said, we understand, and they said, have a nice day.
So just why was the Central Intelligence Agency intervening in a drug conspiracy case that revolved around a 29-year-old black man operating out of Brooklyn? The Frank Matthews case gives us a powerful and disturbing glance into the economic state of urban black America circa 1970.
We must realize that something has been happening economically in our country. People are on the move. The population is shifting.
I've always heard that Negroes buy shoddy, poor quality merchandise.
No, it's just the other way around. According to leading researchers, in proportion to population and income, Negroes buy more quality products than any other comparable United States group. Per capita, they buy more cosmetics, drugs, and toiletries than anyone else in the country.
Like the Italians, Irish, and Jewish families that made their fortune during Prohibition, including the crooked Kennedys, a handful of black gangsters and their families went from rags to riches seemingly overnight. But it was a wild and violent ride. White powder, black power is the story of how the illegal drug economy was the first truly large and widespread capital-building tool for African Americans, all made possible by political decisions in Washington, D.C. and its CIA headquarters. With more money, more murders than even the Prohibition gangster era, and with long-lasting consequences that haunt our urban landscapes to this day. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times for black America. In 1959, nearly 60% of blacks lived in poverty. 10 years later, that figure was down to 32%. But while it was the white people fleeing the cities because of crime, decay, and industrial decline, it was black people actually suffering from the rapid growth of crime in the late 60s. The riots across the country, from Watts to Harlem, sped up this process and left a lawless urban landscape ripe for the pickings of a new breed of criminal, the drug kingpin.
Historically, heroin had been in the black communities way back in the early days.
We as Americans always want to be very romantic about things. This is about capitalism, and this is about a type of capitalism that many poor blacks could not go anywhere but to.
As I talked about in Cold War heroin heat, the increased drug supply was a direct result of the American government's decision to protect French, Italian, and Chinese drug dealers as they flooded the streets of black America with illegal drugs for political reasons.
61, 62, when it started getting real popular. And then around 1964, 65, it was really growing. It was booming, like, you know.
In Harlem, which was ground zero of the heroin epidemic thanks to the Italian Mafia, a shocking 20%, 1 in 5 of black men were injecting heroin with needles on a daily basis circa 1970.
3 of the biggest drug kingpins in the United States at that time were black: Frank Lucas, Leslie Ike Atkinson and Frank Pee Wee Matthews. Extremely intelligent. They were not given the education opportunities that the whites had.
It was a poor community. We lived in poor housing. From that poor housing, we went to poor schools, received a poor education, and that poor education sent us on poor-paying jobs. It returned us right back into the poor community.
Paid you, what, $1.55 an hour. You know, here, the only job you're gonna get, wash these dishes. You know, a lot of disrespect, and I wasn't having that. And the only other way I knew to earn that type of money was in narcotics.
With Vietnam and the introduction of LSD and the return of the soldiers from Vietnam, the drug scene kind of proliferated.
Every man leaving South Vietnam now is tested for heroin addiction.
New York City was ground zero. 1 out of 5 men in Harlem were injecting heroin on a daily basis, and a rogues gallery of Cuban, Puerto Rican, and black dealers fed the streets with the heroin and cocaine they got from their Italian suppliers, or, increasingly, that they got themselves directly. New connects, new sources of supply were appearing every day as the drug business had become an important part of the American economy.
The interesting thing is I toured the nation. I saw those same types of men in many cities, whether it was Philadelphia or Baltimore or Washington, D.C. They were the ones that would go to the little private parties after a concert, and those men were an elite group.
There's an old saying in the streets, there's no business like blow business. In 1970, $500 of Turkish morphine base turned into a $5,000 kilo of heroin in Marseille, France, which turned into a $20,000 kilo in New York, which could turn into as much as $1 million by the time it went into a junkie's veins. The poppy plant is the mother of the world's highest profit margin commodity.
This is right before Watergate. The president called all of us down to the White House for a meeting on his drug abuse plan. He was livid with rage when I told him what was going on in Brooklyn. But the violence in Brooklyn at the time, Miami, Baltimore, Philadelphia, and Atlanta, similar information was coming back. Some guy named Matthews was behind the local organizations in those cities. That he was tired of paying huge amounts of money to the La Cosa Nostra, and a group of Jewish businessmen in Brooklyn were distributing heroin.
You know, later I went to the hard narcotics smuggling section of customs. That's when I started getting a little bit of an education and understanding that all the heroin was coming from Italian sources, Jewish too.
In 1959, the criminal landscape of America changed drastically. After mob boss Vito Genovese was sent to prison for heroin conspiracy, the Mafia decided to get out of heroin, which really meant they would simply import the drug with the help of their CIA connections in Europe and let non-family members like the Jewish Herbie Sperling middleman the drug to black and Latino dealers. The biggest middleman of all was Lou Cirillo, the Mafia's point man when they decided to get back in the business around 1970. Before Frank Matthews got his own Corsican source, Lou Cirillo supplied him, along with most of New York's biggest dealers. Something went wrong for the Mafia in 1972, though, something big. So big that the boss of the Lucchese family, Tommy Ryan Eboli, was executed in Crown Heights, Brooklyn on the orders of the Mafia Commission.
The basic issue for us is self-determination. It's to be able to live in America with some degree of dignity. It's to have some control over our own destiny. We don't want welfare, colonialism in the black ghetto. We don't want white business to come in and say, well, we're going to do you a favor today. We're going to give you 300 jobs. The basic issue has to do with whether or not we can control some employment for ourselves. And that means we've got to have some kind of selective patronage. We've got to control businesses in black communities.
So the Mafia heroin business was in disarray and the French Connection was over. In this power vacuum, kingpins like Frank Matthews and Eddie Jackson became some of the richest black men in America almost overnight. Here's an interesting fact. When Norris Herndon, heir to the Atlanta Life Insurance Company and reputedly the richest black man in America, died in 1977, he was worth $23 million.